Marianne?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Great. I believe now we are on. Welcome everyone to today's webinar, and I apologize for the technical difficulties today, but again, welcome. And today we are going to hear about help wanted using visual management to drive continuous improvement. I am Jerry Strohmeyer, the Education and Training Coordinator, Program Coordinator for AME, and I will be your moderator today. Today's presenter is Drew Locker, the Managing Director of Change Management Associates. For over 25 years, Drew has been applying visual management concepts in production, non-production, and project environments. Drew has been a faculty member of LEI, the Lean Enterprise Institute, since 2001, and is a highly rated speaker at the annual AME conference. Drew is also the author of 4 books and a 2-time Shingo Prize recipient. Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping items. You will be in listen-only mode throughout the webinar. You will see that you are muted on your attendee panel and on the right side of your screen. If you have questions during the webinar, please type them into your question area in the attendee panel and click on Submit. We will review the questions at the end of today's presentation and answer as many as we can. When you log off today, please check your email inbox, and it will be an invitation and link to fill out a short webinar attendee survey. Please take a few minutes to complete the survey today, as your feedback is very important to us to improve future webinars. Please forward the survey link to anyone who attends today's webinar so everyone may participate in the survey. Drew has also graciously agreed to provide a PDF of today's presentation. We will be sending that along with a recorded link for webinar replay to each of you no later than Tuesday next week. So without further ado, I am pleased to introduce Drew Locker, who will present Help Wanted using visual management to drive continuous improvement. Take it away, Drew.
Thank you, Jerry Ann. Are we sure everyone can hear us? I don't know if they can type a note and let us know that they can hear everything. That might be helpful.
Okay.
All right, well, we'll get started. Again, sorry for the delay, everyone. The title of the webinar today is Help Wanted Using Visual Management to Encourage Employee Engagement, Facilitative Leadership, and Drive Continuous Improvement. Before we get started, I just want to kind of reinforce something that I've learned over the years, and that's the social power of visual management techniques. It's really, truly amazing when it's done correctly. And when it's not done correctly, it can have quite the opposite effect. So we've got to make sure one of the things I want to cover today is that we get a good sense of kind of the right approach that we should take with this very important subject. It's also a very deep subject that most organizations are just scratching the surface on. So hopefully you get a sense of that through the webinar today. There we go. Here's a quote that I found some time ago from the gentleman who was the founder of the Center for Advanced Visual Studies at MIT back in 1944. The visual language is capable of disseminating knowledge more effectively than almost any other vehicle of communication. Visual communication is universal and international. It knows no limits of tone, vocabulary, or grammar. Visual language can convey facts and ideas in a wider and deeper range than almost any other means of communication. And I truly believe that. So hopefully you do too. Now, one of the things that people tell me, or I would say probably 90% of the visual management systems that people show me, often proudly, are really just metrics, and historic or backward-looking metrics at that. And really, that's just a small portion of a comprehensive visual management system. So one of the points I hope you come away with today is that visual management is much more than just metrics. It's a system that should be used in an active way to really manage. I kind of use the expression, it's a system to manage with, not a system for management. So it's people got to see benefit from its use on a daily, if not more frequent basis. Another key component of visual management systems is to identify non-standard conditions. We're going to talk more about that shortly. Another kind of comment that people often will make to me as they review their systems is that anybody walking by can look at this and immediately glean what's going on. And that expression or that statement kind of concerns me. These have got to be active systems rather than passive wallpaper. So I always respond to that kind of comment and ask, well, how do you use it to really engage people? And often the response really falls short of anything that's adequate. So, however the system works, we got to use it. We can't just think that it's up there and it just becomes wallpaper, and we hope that people are gleaning the right information from it. It's got to include a review, response, and escalation process. So more on non-standard conditions. Some examples of that: not keeping up with the demand of work. Wouldn't it be nice if we could identify that in a near real-time basis? So that would be an important non-standard condition. I want to quickly identify by some visual means. Not following standard work. That should be part of the visual management system, the quick identification if we are or are not following standardized work. Perhaps not performing tasks at the proper time. It would be nice if we could identify that in a timely manner. And of course, not meeting performance expectations, but that doesn't always mean historic metrics that told us how we did last week or last month, but maybe something more in real time, which would be more actionable. And certainly, we want to identify when unforeseen problems have arisen in our processes. I like to use the expression that all roads of visual management should lead to continuous improvement, and I truly believe that. If people see that good comes out of this system, and that that the system itself will give rise to real benefits for everyone, then they're going to be committed to making it work and get people's buy-in. If the response, though, is blame and shame or punitive, then people are not going to accept the concepts of visual management, and who can blame them? So again, I like to emphasize, all roads of visual management should lead to continuous improvement, and people get the right message that this is a good thing. This is something that's going to help us. Which would lead to this question that I'll leave for you to ponder a little bit. I'll give you a minute or so to talk about this, or at least think about this. Why would people resist visual management? Think about those non-standard conditions I just reviewed, making problems visible, performance visible, standardized work visible. Why would people resist visual management? And we do get a lot of pushback on this, very important and fundamental concept. So from my personal experience, it's fear, and more specifically the fear of the response that they will get from others, and in particular their supervisors, managers, their leaders in general. So that's why I'll talk quite a bit early in the webinar about behaviors, and more specifically leaders, the behavior of leaders. Because if they don't respond properly, the system will not work. So people are afraid basically of the response, so we got to make sure that we provide the proper response. So whenever a non-standard condition is identified, it should trigger a supportive or facilitative leadership response. And it's not that people don't want to meet expectations, they don't want to follow standard work, they don't want to meet performance expectations. They just can't at that time. And so I always liken the non-standard conditions as a help wanted call. And who needs to give that help are leaders. We come in, assess the situation, kind of help the group, the individual or the group, think through what the issues are, and then trigger some sort of problem solving or even process improvement response, with the leader helping all along the way. teaching and guiding and coaching all along the way. So when the non-standard conditions are identified, they really tend to trigger two types of responses. One is like a containment response, and what we're going to do right now to work around this problem. And unfortunately, that's often where it ends. But really what should happen is it should trigger an improvement cycle. Again, guided by the leader in a way that I would best describe as together we learn. Let's together learn what the problem is, what the possible causes are, as we go through Deming's Plan, Do, Check, Act improvement cycle. Unfortunately, a lot of people kind of miss that second point. They do the containment reaction, which is really akin to firefighting, but they do not look for the repetitive kind of issues, and that might indicate some systemic causes that would lend itself nicely to some sort of process improvement. So that's kind of a little general review of the concepts. What I'd like to do now is to have a little fun, a little quiz show. I'm going to show some examples of elements of a visual management system. I'll briefly describe the context of each. Then I'll give you a minute or so with your groups to identify what's the help wanted in that example. And very importantly, what would be the appropriate leadership response? It's kind of a two-part question. I'll give you like a minute to kind of mull that over, and then I'll provide the answer or answers, and you can see how you did. If you answer correctly, you get a point, and if not, well, who would know? You'll have to keep score for yourself. So we're on the honor system, and I do this at conferences. We actually have an MC and bells ringing, and we keep score and all that. But with this webinar, you're on your own. Okay? So let's play. So in this example, this actually comes from a large multi-billion-dollar financial institution. These guys will lease anything, aircraft, helicopters, fleets of golf carts. And they had great difficulty really flowing these lease applications, which were really kind of flowed using a folder with all the necessary documentation within it. So one of the things that they did was to get visibility to the queue, put all of the lease applications in one place. And then some limits on that queue. And the limit, if it was exceeded in the limit, it was an indication that exceeding their capacity to process the work in a timely manner. And the flag would go from green to red. So what is the help wanted call here? And what is the appropriate leadership response? I wish, Cherry Ann, we had some scenes to Jeopardy. It could be playing in the background, but I don't think we have that.
No, we don't.
So clearly, and exceeding capacity, and the inappropriate leadership response would be to just go work faster. These people need help, so the appropriate leadership response would be to provide that help. Perhaps resources from other areas within the organization who have been cross-trained in the established standardized work in this area would be pulled to come over and help out until that queue came within the limits that were predefined, and then the flag would go back from red to green, and those resources would go back to doing whatever they were doing. So it's actually a pull system in an office environment using a very simple visual device. So if you got the correct answer to that, including both leadership response, you give yourself a pull. Some of you on the call I've worked with in the past, you may recognize some of these examples. So hopefully I get them right. This example was from a department that wanted to make visible one-off kind of tasks, requests that were placed on the resources in this logistics department. They had a good handle in logistics on inbound trucks, outbound trucks, but it was all this other work that they were doing that they wanted to get visible. And they're just using this board with cards, and every request gets its own card. And there's the information, the nature of the request, and who requested, the date it's due, and so on. And that would end up in a column to do, and then when someone's ready to start working on it, it would go into doing. And usually people would write the name and the date that they assumed responsibility for it. If they didn't have any problems, it would move on to the done. So this to do, doing, done format of a a visual device is very common. I see this quite often in different environments. But if they run into a problem, they're impeded, they can't complete it, it goes in the appropriate column there. So this is a pretty easy one here. This is a gimme, the help wanted and what is the appropriate leadership response. Pretty clear, it says help right at the top of the column. Now the appropriate management response would be, what can I do to help you? And it could be the requester, the manager of the requesting organization, because these are color-coded, these cards. And then that person would take ownership to remove that obstacle so this department can continue on and get the work done. So it's a great example of how to make non-repetitive work visible and also prioritize the work and show the status of it. So escalate when there's an obstacle that encounters appropriate parties to obstacle removal. So if you got that answer correctly, give yourself a point. Same company. I've got a lot of these boards all going on all around the world, actually. It's just an idea board. If anyone has an idea, they can write it on a little Post-it note. And then the local team typically would talk through the idea and do a very basic assessment of effort versus impact. And they would have some definition of what is high effort and low impact and high impact. For our purpose today, we'll just assume low effort are things that we can do ourselves in our department. And high effort would require the support of other departments, maybe a cross-functional team, that kind of thing. So if an idea ends up in the high effort, low impact, that would be in the do not do. So they would actually deselect themselves this idea. I generally use a baseball analogy for these boards. That would be an out. If it was low effort, low impact, it would go into quick hits. And if it was low effort, high impact, it would go into gems. Or if you stick with a baseball analogy, that would be a home run. Again, those are things that the department themselves can work on, and they have to carve out some time to do that, but those are things they can work on. The high effort, high impact ideas, this group is calling strategic. And keep in mind, again, these are things they cannot do. They would need other departments to support them. So we're talking maybe a cross-functional team would have to be assembled, all that. So what is the help wanted here, and what would be the appropriate leader response? Well, clearly, the ones that are low effort, they can handle themselves. So it's the ideas that are falling up in this example, what they're calling strategic. And the proper leadership response might be, one, to make sure that this idea is aligned with the organization and maybe the department and other objectives that they have, because they may deselect because they're not. It also, if they are aligned, then it might trigger a person, a manager, to become a champion and maybe charter a team and initiate a rapid improvement or Kaizen event or mapping event or just some team. Oh, there, you got that. Give yourself a point. Plan versus actual devices of many forms are common in visual management. This particular example is from a production environment. We also would call this particular plan versus actual a by the hour board. It goes through each goals for each hour, adjusts the plan, and so forth. And then there's the actual. And there's a calculation or how much or how ahead, how behind or how ahead they are by hour, and then cumulative through the day. So what's the help wanted here, and what's the appropriate management or leader response? So clearly we're having a difficult time in the beginning of the shift. We're minus 11 to start in the first hour. As most of you probably know, we can't get time back, and as much as we try, we often cannot. So the proper leadership response here would be to ask the question, probably the best question any leader can ask, which is why. Unfortunately, in this example, the team is not writing any comments here. So I always try to make the point, it's not just the numbers that are important, but it's the comments, the issues that are that give a context to those numbers that are equally, if not more important. Because it would be those comments that might trigger, an improvement cycle and that a leader could help the team work through. If I'm coming by as a leader and I see day after day some issues, in the morning or the beginning of a shift, that might cause us to go focus at the time and see what we can do to improve that. So that's a plan versus actual board, and if you got that answer right, you have yourself a point. Now, something similar, but in a project environment, the way this board is set up, on the left-hand side are longer-term projects, and then on the right-hand side here are just the tasks we're going to work on in the next 1 or 2 weeks. And then there's due dates, as you can see, for both the longer-term projects and also the specific dates. And then they're just using a traffic light technique, green and red, to indicate that they're on schedule, they haven't run into any problems, would be green, and red would be that they have run into the problems. So this is pretty clear. I'm not going to give you much time on this one. Any task with a red next to it is an indication of a help wanted call. And there are a place for comments, and you see that there are some comments, but not all. So once again, this team needs to use the board a little more effectively. But the response to from the leader should be, why? What is the issue and how can I help? Interesting about this example, in engineering, when I first started working with this group just last year, in the second half of last year, actually last quarter, I went around and just asked people, how do you feel? Do you feel a sense of accomplishment when you go home each weekend? And 9 out of 10 people said no. This is a long-term, long-duration project environment, and that tends to happen in those environments. By breaking the work down, as you see on the right-hand side of what we expect to accomplish, what those people expect to accomplish, the team members this week or maybe the next 2 weeks, has actually given them a tremendous sense of accomplishment, to the point where the chief engineer who oversees this department sent me a note where he says Fridays is now like a celebration, a day of celebration. Because on Monday they say what they want to accomplish this week, and then on Friday they get to show did they complete it, and if not, what problems. And more often than not, they're getting things done. They're setting a nice pace and rhythm to the work, and very importantly, they're getting a great sense of accomplishment. So he excitedly sent me a note, and this is like amazing. The people, there's like a celebration every week. So wouldn't that be nice if we had that in all our work environments? In this particular example, this is a make-to-order, design-to-order housing, pre-made housing, not modular housing, but they would pre-make the roof trusses, floor trusses, wall panels, and so forth. And one of the things that they had difficulty was every day, every shift, they had to move people around based on the demand. And it used to take them, no exaggeration, about 30 minutes to kind of get people settled in the right place in the different departments. And what we ended up doing here, they created a nice visual device. This is for the roof truss department, as you can see. And each of these magnets is for a different team member. And it has also the current status of their skills. So, for example, Gustavo here is capable in the F or frame department. F or frame department. The floor department. R is the roof department. S is the saw department, and W is the wall panel department. He's also certified in operating the fork truck, and he has had some training in safety training. Part of their safety program is they want certified safety folks in every area, so many for so many employees. And they certainly need, these are big items, they need fork truck drivers, and they need to be certified fork truck drivers, and they need so many in the different departments. So what ends up happening now is it's very easy. They can look at the schedule before the shift starts. They can assign people based on the schedule to each area, because it's very clear who can do what. And then based on absenteeism, they might have to tweak some things and move people around. So in this particular example, the wall panel, the roof truss line, they have 4 workstations, and really each workstation should be staffed with 4 people. So what's the help wanted here, and what's the proper leadership response? It's pretty evident. There's a big gaping hole here. The gray team needs another person. And the proper leadership response would be, who else we have in the other departments that has been trained, be very easy to identify, and then maybe move some people around as necessary so they're properly staffed. So what used to take them about a half hour each shift to kind of get settled and really get going in the productions, they can do now in 10 to 15 minutes, including a daily huddle with each of the departments. So they can review goals and expectations as well as figure out the proper staffing scenarios for each department. 5S is another example of or component of visual management, and people are very familiar, I'm sure, on the call with shadow boards. So real quick, what is the help wanted here, and what is the proper management response? You can see pretty clearly, well, this item's missing, but it's right there, and actually that's a disc that goes with that polishing equipment. But this item right here, the square, is missing. And what's the proper leadership response? Well, an inappropriate response would be, what's wrong with you people? You got to put these things back. How many times have I told you? Which is something I see quite common in my travels. Really, the proper leadership response is a question: why? Why is it we are unable to return this? Maybe we're using it somewhere else, and maybe we need one of these tools in another place. But I always share the story of walking through many facilities, really, and people, the plant manager, complaining to me that people don't put things back where they belong, and I kind of always turn that around and say, well, maybe it's where you think it should be is the wrong place. We want a functionally organized work environment where it's easy to obtain the tools we need and to return them. So the fact that people can't return them to a place really should generate a more meaningful conversation rather than just a blame and shame or punitive response, which I commonly see. So I hope you got that answer correct. You give yourself a point. Here's an interesting example from healthcare. It's called a Kamashibi board. And the Kamashibi board, I've not used that term, but I just kind of recently came upon that. But I've been trying to get people to use this kind of device for years. What it is, it's meant to help us sustain standardized work, which has been a point of frustration for many organizations. So the way this kind of works is this is actually a month, 30 days or so, 31 days of the month. And each day there is a card. And that card representing specific standardized work. And someone in a collaborative way will go observe it. It could be the leader of the department, maybe the department head. It could be the resources observing each other. But it's done in a collaborative way. If you notice, sometimes we're doing this twice a day. Like on the 16th of the month, there's two things that we're observing. If the person observes and finds that we're able to follow the standardized work, it's green. If the person is observed and the person's not following the established standardized work, it's red. And the proper leadership response is not, again, punitive, but it's a question of why. Perhaps it indicates that something has changed in our process and we need to change our standardized work. Or perhaps it might trigger some additional training or education for that individual. So the help wanted here is the red, clearly, but there's another help wanted too, possibly. If you look a little closely, you can see there's some dates. I think when I took this picture, it was the 22nd of the month. If you look at the 21st, looks like we didn't do any sort of check here. No collaborative process observation. That, too, should elicit a leader's response of why. This is really important to our sustain model and sustaining standardized work. Why are we unable to, on certain days, perform this very important task? And the leader could perhaps help that person or persons or that department really try to figure out how they can free up the necessary time to do this more frequently. Now, another benefit that this hospital will describe to you is that in the past, most hospitals depend on the quality department to do audits, and they'll audit these procedures usually annually. With this kind of device, there's no more surprises when the quality department does their annual audits, because this department has great continual awareness of what is really happening and how the work is being performed. So this, is a nice device that can be used to help us sustain standardized work in any work environment. So many of you have probably seen the next example in some form. This is what many people call a skills matrix. We have the various skills required in the department across the top. We have our team members on the left-hand side. In this particular example, they're using some levels to indicate proficiency in a particular task by each individual. 0 is they can't do this. They need supervision. 1 means they need limited supervision. 2 is they're on their own. They can do this with acceptable quality and production. And 3 indicates that they can also teach others. So if you look at this, you look down the column, and what's the help wanted on this? You look down the column, look across the rows, and what do you see? On each column, which is the skills, you see plenty of people are cross-trained, so we look pretty good there. So no help wanted there. But as you look in the rows, each individual, you come to this gentleman here, Daniel Rodriguez. He's been cross-trained to some degree, but still needs supervision for all of that. So the help wanted call here is, what can we do to help Daniel? And the leader's response would be to try to provide the time or the means for the proper training to be given to Daniel. So he doesn't need that limited supervision. That would help the supervisor as well as Daniel as well, right? So the help wanted here is on an individual personal development basis, and the response from the leader is providing the means of doing that. So if you got that answer correct, give yourself a point. The next example is part of a continuous improvement system, or an element of continuous improvement as part of a more comprehensive visual management system. This company is using A3s. This might be someone on the call today. They're a big, very active member of AME. And they kind of have some things around the A3 here in the second column from the left. They've got titles, and they've got some pictures and things to clarify the problem they're working on. And they have the actions that they're to be working on presently to support the improvement initiative that's documented on the A3. On the right-hand picture, a little closer up view, are those steps. They're just using a simple 25, 50, 75, 100% to convey the status of progress that they're making to complete that. If they finished on time, per their expectations and no other problems, they would fill that in as green. And if they completed it but found some problems or maybe delayed, they would fill it in red. So they're using traffic light techniques here of red and green. So the help one is pretty clear. I don't even need to give you time for that. It's these tasks. And the appropriate leadership response would be, well, how can I help you? What's the issue and how can I help you? So it's really keeping out in the open how we're doing with improvement. There's another aspect to this visual device. This can only hold 3. So they can only be working on 3 major improvement projects. These are the major improvement projects at any time. So they're not trying to do 20 things at once, just 3. That's what they found worked for them. And then somewhere is a stack of in queue to other ideas for improvement, other A3s that they haven't really initiated beyond maybe a target and a title and a background statement. But they can't start any of those until they actually complete one on the board here. So it's like a full system. and they standardize their work in process of how many major improvement initiatives they feel they really can do and do well by use of this device. The next example is from a test lab at a Tier 1 automotive supplier, and the test requests are here on magnets. We like magnets with the visual management because it makes it very easy to maintain the board, and change them if you have to update them. A lot of erasing and rewriting of information. And there's actually two tests that this lab performs, one in these two columns. And if everything is working well, it's just a green square. But if they run into an issue, it then goes into a diamond configuration. And that actually triggers a response of a certain management level. And then if that issue goes unresolved into the second week, they flip the manual over and it's a red square, and that actually gets escalated to another response, another group of leaders. And then if that still goes unresolved into week 3, it gets escalated once again. So this is a gimme in terms of our test, our clue, in that the whole response has been defined. So it's a great example of it's not just identifying every problem, but actually triggering action decisions of the right people at the right level to quickly resolve the issues. Okay? That's an example of an escalation process, like an end-on process that many of you are probably familiar with on the call. This little example from an office, they're using a simple visual technique of color-coded tabs. Color-coded tabs indicate the day of the week the information is received, and in turn its age. The goal is to have all information processed within the day of receipt. In this example, let's say that green is today and yellow was yesterday. So what's the help wanted call here? If the goal is to get everything processed within the day of receipt, it's the work that's in that yellow tab. And the appropriate leadership response would be why? What is unique about this work, and what can we do to help you get this work back into flow? This simple example is from another office, and it's just 3 people in this small office, each with a set of tasks that are defined in each column. And not just a task, but the time these tasks are to be done are also noted. So I'm supposed to do, like here, there's 9 receipted some sort of inventory transaction on the computer, and they need to be done at 10:30. And the little dots next to it indicate that that task was completed when it was supposed to be. There's no meaning to the color in this example. So look a little closely, and what do you see is the help wanted. Remember, each dot indicates that that work was completed when it was supposed to. Well, you'll notice the person whose work is represented in the middle column, they have yet to complete this task. And it's getting kind of close to the end of the day for them. They start very early in the facility. And the help wanted might be from their team members, or maybe the supervisor, their supervisor asking the team members to help out because their work has been completed for the day as indicated by the little colored dots. So nothing too fancy, but very effective in knowing what people are supposed to do, when they're supposed to do it, what's the progress of doing it, and maybe even triggering a collaborative response to helping each other out where appropriate. Same company, actually, same little office. When they go to do any of these transactions and activities, if they run into any problems, they created really what is a living, breathing Pareto chart. Monday through Friday, and just counting how many errors by different categories that they had, how many problems, I should say, that they had. At the end of the week, they can get a tally, and if they so choose, they could, trigger an improvement cycle, maybe working on the ones that are happening the most frequently, or not. But the leader would then help them go through an improvement cycle to address that, to reduce the frequency of some of these problems in the future. So the help wanted here would be tallying up, and then the response would be triggering an improvement cycle and teaching and guiding the team how to do the PDCA cycle in an effective way would be what we would hope the leader would do. So those are just a handful of examples that hopefully you give you an idea of, how broad this subject really is, and all the things that are possible with visual management beyond just posting metrics that tell us how we did, last week or last month. So I don't know if you were keeping count at home, but I guess you all passed. We'll just assume so. If not, well, no one else would know. All right, so to kind of wrap up with the subject, a couple things. The real key here is that leaders exhibit the appropriate behaviors, and if they do not, we're going to really have difficulty with this subject. And in turn, they should encourage the desired behaviors of all team members, like showing appreciation when team members identify problems. They should acknowledge it and show some appreciation for that. They should show respect, and that means, finger pointing and all that, but really just listen, look, and learn together. So too often with these devices, it tends to be a one-way conversation, and it really needs to be a two-way dialogue between the leaders and the team members. We always talk about go see, ask questions, and show respect when we talk about lean leaders and lean leadership. So question-wise, we should ask what questions, focusing on the process rather than who questions, because we really need to avoid any sense of blame and shame and punitive responses, or we can't expect people to follow or use these systems. I also encourage leaders to recognize that when a help wanted call comes in some visual way or other ways, that it often represents a teaching and coaching opportunity for the leader to maybe teach and coach good, solid problem solving and process improvement methodologies and techniques and skills, but also maybe helping the team learn a little bit more about the business, the overall business system. So there's just tremendous opportunities to teach when a help wanted call arises. And then what you find over time, the people can kind of become better and better problem solvers, and there'll be fewer and fewer help wanted calls because the problems will be resolved or prevented. So the key is to focus on the process and not the people per se. And recognizing that often that help wanted, particularly if it's repetitive, if it's indicative of a more systemic cause, it should trigger an improvement cycle. And if we do and follow this up with some improvement and people see that, they recognize what we're really after with not just visual management but all of lean, which is continuous improvement. Now we do have to hold people accountable. If they're not putting the comments down, like some of the examples you saw, or they're not identifying problems, we have to coach them. In particular, the leaders have to hold themselves accountable. They've got to go to the Gemba, go to these devices, show interest, have the dialogue, have the discussion, because if they do not, they will send the message that these things are not important and people will not sustain them. They won't maintain them over time. And the other behavior that we want to really promote is that it's a good thing to identify problems. Some people are good problem solvers, some people are good problem identifiers. We need all of that. So celebrating, thanking people when they identify, just identifying problems is a good thing. Leaders should be doing that as a regular practice. And if we take this proper approach that I'm really emphasizing, then I think what the result will be is a truly engaged workforce, willing to identify problems, willing to do something to address them and improve their processes, but doing it in a very collaborative, way where everyone's working together, leadership and the associates. Because as I often say, people just need a little help. And the visual management system is just an outstanding way of conveying that and triggering what we hope is the proper leadership response. So that's what we kind of wanted to cover today. Some contact information if you want to contact me after the webinar. I'm going to turn it back to Jerry Ann to see if there's any questions we can answer with the time that remains.
Okay, great. Thank you, Drew. And now we will review any questions. Again, if you do have questions for Drew, please submit them in your screen on the right, and I will read them. And again, I apologize to everyone for the delay in the start of this webinar today. First question is, any tips for remote workforce?
That's a great question. And that's happening more and more these days, isn't it? So all the examples you saw were quite manual techniques, and I usually tell people a few things or make a few suggestions, really. There's two major considerations in terms of do you have to go electronic, and one is proximity of people. You know, if the people that need this information are separated by great distance on different continents, we may want to consider electronic. If the second consideration is if there's a lot of information we're trying to convey, first we would challenge that and say, do we really need all this? Like any of the lean concepts, people can tend to overdo them. But if it's truly, you know, where we've got to do a lot or try to convey a lot of information, there's going to be a tendency to want to go electronic as well. But even if people are separated by a great distance, what we could still do is I could take a picture with my camera phone there, and I could email it to those people, and they could do the same with their visual devices at their location and email it to me, and then we could kind of reconcile our visual displays at each location. We could do that once a day or twice a day, you know, if that's all we need to, these devices need to be updated, which very often is the case. So even with great distance, you know, I wouldn't be too quick to discard the manual technique. I've had companies set up webcams where they could just dial in and, you know, see the visual device in another continent, and that can work out just as well. What you do lose a lot, though, is the social aspect of this, which I said at the very beginning of the webinar. But nowadays you have Skype, you know, there's all kinds of tools, collaborative tools that are out there now. So that kind of helps overcome some of that issue of proximity. So I don't know if that helps or not.
Great, great. Well, I don't see any more questions, but thank you for your questions. And this will bring our webinar to a close. And we want to thank you, Drew, for a very insightful presentation. Our next webinar is scheduled for May 8th, titled 2 Second Lean, Unraveling the Mystery of Building a Lean Culture. Please visit ame.org, webinars under events for more information and to register. And don't forget to fill out the short survey that will be in your inbox. We recently relaunched the Benchmarking Community of Practice to members on the AME website. Please feel free to review the Benchmarking Query System archive library and to use the query system to add queries and receive responses within the community. Go to the BCOP query system found under the Education and Training tab on the AME.org website. Thank you again, everyone, for attending and for your patience, and have a very